Us volia donar en nom del CCCB la benvinguda a aquesta conferència de Patricia Evangelista, que és la nova resident del CCCB, en el programa de residències internacionals que el CCCB comparteix amb la Universitat Oberta de Catalunya, a través del qual algunes veus més destacades a nivell internacional venen a passar entre 2 i 3 mesos a Barcelona per comissariar i fer programes per al CCCB i també per vincular-se molt estretament amb la vida cultural, universitària i acadèmica de la ciutat. És un grandíssim honor donar la benvinguda a Patricia Evangelista, periodista filipina, que ha escrit un llibre importantíssim, un llibre extraordinari que acaba de ser traduït al català i al castellà. Vull donar les gràcies també a l'editorial Coma Negra i a Reservoir Books que ens acompanyin avui i que ens hagin acompanyat en aquest procés. Aquesta és la segona vegada que Patricia Evangelista és al CCCB. Va ser la convidada d'un altre resident nostre, el primer resident d'aquest programa, de Patrick Radenkiv, que va ser qui ens la va presentar i ens va dir: vull convidar a Barcelona Patricia Evangelista per la seva feina extraordinària d'investigació sobre els assassinats extrajudicials del règim de Duterte a Filipines. Aquest és un llibre centrat en el cas de Filipines, però que té realment una envergadura universal, que ens parla de com es construeix el llenguatge totalitari, com es brutalitza i es normalitza la violència a tots nivells i, per tant, ressona moltíssim en el moment que estem vivint tots, tant a nivell europeu com a nivell internacional. La Patricia avui inaugura aquest cicle que porta per títol Escriure en temps de foscor, que durarà 2 o 3 setmanes més, on participaran també Caroline Emke, Teju Cole i Rebecca Solnit, tots persones, escriptors, intel·lectuals que estan molt compromesos en el món d'avui a intentar trobar escletxes de llibertat i de futur en aquests moments tan complicats, i estem molt contents que sigui la Patricia qui inauguri aquest cicle, acompanyada de la Carme Colomina, una altra gran còmplice del CCCB. Moltíssimes gràcies, Carme, per haver-nos acompanyat. Coneixeu tots a la Carme, és periodista, columnista del diari Ara i investigadora al CIDOB, on dirigeix un programa importantíssim també sobre desinformació, i serà ella qui ara presentarà a la Patricia. Moltíssimes gràcies a totes dues i et cedeixo la paraula, Carme.
Doncs moltes gràcies a Judit, al CCCB, i moltes gràcies per donar-me l'oportunitat precisament d'estar avui aquí amb la Patricia Evangelista, que és una periodista que es defineix ella mateixa com periodista de traumes. La seva feina, que ara és internacionalment reconeguda, el que fa és relatar precisament les vivències traumàtiques de gent en contextos de conflicte, conflictes armats, però també catàstrofes naturals, en la lluita pels drets humans, i a través d'aquest llibre impressionant que deia la Judit, relata realment la història recent i convulsa de les Filipines. Ella avui és col·laboradora habitual de mitjans com el New York Times i el New Yorker, però va ser durant 7 anys reportera de Rappler, un altre mitjà que també hem conegut tristament per la pressió que ha patit durant tots aquests anys. Ella allà, en aquesta agència de notícies independent que va fundar precisament la Premi Nobel de la Pau, la Maria Ressa, ella va produir una sèrie de reportatges multimèdia que es deia Impunitat, i aquesta és la sèrie una mica que després ens porta a aquest llibre que avui presentarem. És una sèrie que el que fa és investigar sobretot aquesta guerra contra les drogues amb la nomenclatura que feia servir el propi Duterte. De fet, va impulsar el president Rodrigo Duterte, però sobretot és un llibre que retrata i que testimonia amb la veu dels testimonis, de fet, en primera persona, les execucions extrajudicials que es van estar portant a terme a Filipines. És un llibre que ha rebut el Premi de Premsa de Drets Humans, 3 premis de la Societat d'Editors d'Àsia, va ser finalista del Premi Osborne Elliott de Periodisme, ha estat guardonada també amb el Premi Kate Webb de Periodisme Excepcional en Condicions de Perill i ha estat beneficiària de les beques de l'ASO Future Security, la Civitella Ranieri Foundation, el Dart Center for Journalists and Trauma i Logan Non-Fiction Program. Bé, aquest llibre, que ja dèiem, algú els ha de matar, crònica de la violència al meu país, és sobretot una construcció minuciosa d'històries concretes, d'històries que ella mateixa ens explicarà avui, però també és una construcció minuciosa de la història del seu país, de la seva família, de com viu una societat sota el trauma i sota la repressió. És un llibre sobre com exercir el periodisme, i per això encaixa en el que en el que discutirem en tota aquesta sèrie, però també en com viure, no?, en un règim que executa persones d'aquesta manera, que emmordassa la premsa quan tu ets a qui li toca documentar tot això que passa. I com que és veritat que la Patricia diu en el llibre molt bé que en els periodistes sempre ens ensenyen que el periodista no ha de ser la notícia, però en qualsevol cas aquest és un moment molt difícil pel periodisme i per la llibertat d'expressió i és d'això del que volem parlar. Ella diu: la gent com jo, escriu la Patricia, treballem en l'espai incòmode entre el que és i el que hauria de ser, i ella mateixa ens explicarà amb les seves paraules com és aquest espai incòmode i sobretot com l'ha canviat a ella, com l'ha transformat i com ha transformat el seu país. So, Patricia, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Hola. Okay, I had prepared something beautiful and very respectful in Catalan, but I forgot all of it. So I will instead prove I know how to speak Catalan by telling you the first sentence I learned, compliments of the CCCB. ¿Puedo fumar aquí? No? No? All right, how about we start with a story, yeah? On November 29, 2015, 161 days before the Philippine presidential elections, the mayor of a southern city in the Philippines named Rodrigo Duterte stood on stage and spoke at a campaign rally. The mayor said many things, and he said things in a way that no politician had ever said before. He talked about the fucking government and the fucking airport and the fucking drunks and about fucking his 2 girlfriends at cheap by-the-hour motels, 1 fuck at a time, because even on Viagra, that's all he could do. And the audience laughed. The mayor said he was a killer. He said he hadn't killed many people, and he counted them off. 1, 2, 3, 4. And he said, if he won the presidency, the druggies should give up and hang themselves because he would kill them all. He wasn't kidding, he said. He was serious. If people wanted him to be president, he would be president. He would accept it. He would take responsibility. He would call the military. He would call the police. He would tell them to kill every drug addict in the country. And if they failed, he would kill them himself. You cannot protect people if you do not kill people, said Rodrigo Duterte. He said that he'll have his cops shoot the sons of bitches, drop them to the ground, plant a gun on each hand. That way, people could say the bastards fought back. But everyone else, you law-abiding, God-fearing, good citizens of the Republic, you have nothing to fear from Rodrigo Duterte. 5 months later, the mayor of Davao City became His Excellency Rodrigo Duterte, President of the Republic of the Philippines. And the drug war began. Rodrigo Duterte told a story. He took every fear and every grievance fueled by decades of failed expectations of poverty, and then he gave the enemy a name. He called it the scourge of illegal drugs. And he said he would kill to destroy it. In the story Duterte told, Duterte had your back. And he said the struggle ended here, today. Fuck the bleeding hearts, to hell with bureaucracy. There would be no forgiveness. There would be no second chances. A line would be drawn, and Duterte would stand on the other side with a loaded gun. Here was a man who said what he meant and meant what he said, would give you a warning, then count 1, 2, 3. Now, in the hands of any other man, any other president, the story might have stayed a story. But this was Rodrigo Duterte, the Punisher from the South, under whose watch hundreds reportedly were killed by death squads he had organized himself. He could promise death, because he said he had done it himself. He didn't just tell a story, he was the story. He embodied it. Here was a man who was different, who could do things, but who carried the same rage as everyone else. I am one of you, he said. I'm no one special, he said. I'm just an ordinary killer. Rodrigo Duterte became every man, so every man could be Rodrigo Duterte. Now how do you put a story on trial? Early in the drug war, I talked to a little girl. Her name was Lady Love. She was small for her age, all skinny brown legs and big dark eyes. She was 11 years old. Nobody called her Lady. Everyone called her Love Love. And only her father called her Love. Just Love. Love Love lived on the second floor of a shanty with her mother and her father and her many little siblings. Then one night, late in the night, two men burst into the room where she slept with her family. One of them stood over her father, looked down, and said, "Positive." Positive, he meant. Positive for being a list of illegal drug users and dealers. Love Love's father tried to sit up, but there was a baby asleep on his chest, so he fell back down again. Then he said one word, and it would turn out to be his last word. He turned his head, and then he looked at Love Love, and then he said, "Love," just before the bullet cracked across his right temple. So the baby wailed, and Love Love's mother wept. But it was Love Love who threw herself between the gunman and her mother. It was Love Love who stood with the barrel of the gun just inches from her forehead. And it was Love Love, all skinny brown legs and big dark eyes, who swore at the gunman and demanded he shoot her instead. "Kill me," she said, "not my ma." The gunmen left, but they weren't gone for long. When they came back, one of them stood in front of Love Love's mother, raised his gun arm, and said, "Duterte kami." "We are Duterte," said the gunman with a mask. He emptied the magazine, and Love Love's mother died on her knees. To vote for Rodrigo, to vote for Rodrigo Duterte, you have to believe in certain things. You have to believe that he is a righteous man. You have to believe that he's not a rapist or didn't want to be a rapist, even if he said he wanted to be one himself. You have to believe he was poor or was once poor or had lived with the poor, even if he was a governor's son. You have to believe in destiny. You have to believe in God. You had to believe that God had a peculiar preference for murderous autocrats because the presidency is destiny and Rodrigo Duterte was destined to lead. To believe in Rodrigo Duterte, you had to believe he was brave. You had to believe he would cut America out of military agreements and that Barack Obama was a son of a bitch. You had to believe that he would manage to jump on a jet ski, sail out in the open sea, and plant a flag on the islands China had seized. To believe in Rodrigo Duterte, you have to believe he's a killer, or was joking when he said he was a killer. You had to believe in the specter of a narco state, or you had to believe he was playing to the crowd. You had to believe drug addiction was criminal, that drug addicts were not human, and that their elimination should be considered acceptable public policy. To believe in Rodrigo Duterte, you have to believe he is just. You have to believe he is honest. You have to believe he is untainted by the oligarchy and beholden to no one. You had to believe he was your father. You had to believe he was your savior. You had to believe he loved you because you love him enough to carry his name. "We are Duterte," said the gunman with a mask. It seems an appropriate time First, to get a drink of water. And to introduce myself. My name is Pat. I was born in 1985 in Manila, 5 months before a street revolution brought democracy back to the Philippines. Evangelista, my surname, which is common in my country, means bringer of good news. It is an irony I'm informed of often. I'm a trauma reporter. My job is to go to places where people die. I pack my bags, bring my cameras, interview the survivors, investigate the causes, file my stories, then go home to wait for the next catastrophe. I don't wait very long. But I can tell you about those places. There have been many in the last decade. There were the coastal villages after typhoons, where babies were zipped into backpacks after the body bags ran out. There are the hillsides in the south, where 58 people, including 32 journalists, were massacred then buried in a layer cake of cars and corpses. There are the safe houses in the city, where young girls speak softly about being stripped naked as white men watch from the other side of the world. There are the shanty towns during demolitions, the cornfields in rebel countries, the courtrooms where generals lied about torture and murder. I'm a journalist of 15 years standing. I do not traffic in hope. I wrote about terrible things that happened because those things shouldn't have happened and shouldn't happen again. Then one day, the man who would become president of the Philippines promised the deaths of his own citizens. The terrible became ordinary, to thundering applause. In 1936, the English writer George Orwell traveled to Spain as a correspondent for the new leader. He carried with him several pounds of candles, tobacco, and the thickest clothes he could bring. He could not speak much Spanish then, but he kept a diary and sent dispatches from the trenches written on the backs of envelopes and scraps of paper. I sometimes fear, Orwell wrote in homage to Catalonia, that we shall never wake till we are jerked out of it by the roar of bombs. Like Orwell, I'm a reporter. Unlike him, I am not a foreign correspondent. The fact that I am Filipino living in the Philippines means I never go home from the field. There's no 7-day shooting schedule with a pre-booked flight and an option to extend. I do not need a translator to tell me that the man standing over his brother's body screaming "putang ina" means motherfucker instead of son of a bitch. The fact that I'm Filipino also means I understand guilt. In the complicated way only a Catholic raised in colonized Philippines understands guilt. I know, for example, why a father kneels, washing away his son's blood while apologizing to the linoleum. I know that he understands the guilt of 4 bullets going through his son's body, forehead, chest, and skinny shoulders, in a manner he believes is like the sign of the cross, sa ngalan ng Ama, at ng Anak, at ng Espiritu Santo. I know this because I am my father's daughter. And while my survival is a privilege, I know my own father prays too. By early 2017, 7 months into the drug war, the death toll was past 7,000. I am the president now, Rodrigo Duterte said. The fight against the drug people will continue to the very last day of my term. That is 6 years. Another killing for the night? I don't mind. It was the necessary fiction of the drug war. Those who threatened the future would simply die because they had lost the right to live. The president would offer bounties. He would tell the police to hunt them and to kill them. They would be struck down by their own neighbors if their neighbors had guns. You have my support, said Rodrigo Duterte. They would be drowned, stabbed, shot, dropped into Manila Bay, fed to the fishes, sent to purgatory, and none of it would be murder because it was not murder. Only justice. Simple justice, Rodrigo Duterte said. Not murder, murder. In August, during a single 24-hour period, the police in one province killed 32 drug suspects. The next morning, Duterte strolled up a lectern in the presidential palace. He said, 32 died early in a massive raid. Maganda yun. In Filipino, in Tagalog, maganda means beautiful. It can also mean good. It is uncertain what Rodrigo Duterte meant that afternoon in August, but there is a reason why every English language news service chose to use the word good as a translation instead of beautiful. Because good, as egregious a judgment as it is far less outrageous than beautiful. Beautiful would have offered an element of pleasure, a romanticizing of brutality, the impression that the commander-in-chief of a democratic republic was not just pleased, but delighted by the ruthless killings of his own citizens. But here was what President Duterte said that afternoon. 32 died early in Bulacan in a massive raid. That's beautiful. If we can kill another 32 every day, maybe we can reduce what ails the country. The president has called many things beautiful. It was not the first time. And every time he called something beautiful, he defined for the nation what beauty was to the millions who watched every day. Pajamas, for example, was beautiful, according to the president. Roads were beautiful. Federalism, trains, the king of Cambodia's mother, when she was young, was beautiful. An actress who was raped was beautiful. A white missionary who had been raped before she was murdered, she was beautiful too. Except the president said he wishes he had raped her first. The president's girlfriend, the older one, was more beautiful than the other one, he said, in no particular order. A song written about him, the language in the introduction of the International Narcotics Control Board's brochure, his relationship with the military and the police, being called mayor instead of president, and beautiful women, Filipino women. It is the mayor's happiness, he said, to look at beautiful women. Melania Trump, he said, was beautiful. So were motorcycles, including the 750 Harley-Davidson Sportsters. Corpses with one bullet per skull were beautiful. Bridges were beautiful. Beaches were beautiful. Auditoriums were beautiful. His circumcised penis, he said, was beautiful. The defense secretary's hair was beautiful. The sky at dusk, the linen at the Peninsula Hotel, American-made barrettes, Jericho handguns, the Nighthawk 45 pistol, Chinese-made sniper rifles, a woman that he had met whose distribution of flesh was almost perfect. And on that day in August of 2017, the brutal deaths of 32 of his own citizens. That, he said, was beautiful too. The police were not responsible for all the killing. Unknown hitmen was a favorite phrase, and it was the nature of their victims, suspected drug pusher, suspected drug dealer, on a watch list, on the local drug list, most wanted, that demonstrated that what was happening was far from random. The methods were limited only by the killer's imagination. There was a man who was found dead after being abducted from his house. There were the 3 men found in a canal, blind and hog-tied. There was a man shot in the head in his bedroom, the man shot across his child's elementary school at 7 in the morning, and all the many men who were found dead with packing tape wrapped around their heads, including the man whose killers had drawn a happy smile on his packing tape face. From the start, There were rumors that cops were outsourcing murders to these unknown hitmen, to vigilantes. I found a few of them after months of hunting. I'll tell you about a man named Simon. It's not his real name because I am allowed to use his real name. But I'll tell you about Simon. Simon calls himself a family man. He has a wife, he has children, he goes to church, he has a gun. According to Simon, his gang had killed at least 20 within a 7-month period on orders from the police. Simon had killed at least 2. And by kill, it means he pulled the trigger. But he was part of other operations in other places. He drove the surveillance van. He acted as a lookout. He participated in many other kills. And no job was too hard for Simon. Because for him, success at the job, the killing, meant one less addict, one less dealer that would destroy the future of his children. I'm not a bad guy, Simon told me. I'm not all bad. It's just some people need killing. So I was supposed to interview Simon for a few more hours that day, but he said he had to leave at 7 p.m. The cops were coming, he told me, and they all had a job to do. Now, Rodrigo Duterte was not the first politician in the world to declare war on a domestic issue. Wars on poverty, pornography, hunger, cancer, drugs have been launched and fought by presidents and potentates the world over. None of those wars have so far been won, but that doesn't matter. For a politician, the victory is in the declaration. The headlines are published, the pamphlets are spread out, and the solution is left to whoever comes next, or to God. But Duterte was not in love with metaphorical wars. He declared a drug war, and when he said kill, he meant dead. In the Philippines, there was an opposition. There were priests. There were activists and nurses and doctors and journalists, and all of them saw what was happening in the war. But for most everyone else, life proceeded as normal. There are places in my country, after all, where death is a polite abstraction. A coffin, a bouquet, a sprinkle of holy water. In those places, it is possible for a person to live and die without ever having seen a bullet, or what a bullet does to a body when fired at close range. One day, in 2020, all of that would change because there was video. I'll take you to that moment. A young man stands in the middle of a lawn. His name is Anton, and he is about to die. Had he known this, maybe he would have said something else when he saw the big man stalking down the lawn towards him. But Anton was drunk, and Anton was angry, and what he said instead was this: "You wouldn't be so brave if you didn't have that gun." The big man said, "You son of a bitch, I'm arresting you." He reached out for Anton, but there was Sonia to contend with. Short, gray-haired Sonia, Anton's mother, who had thrust herself between the big man and her 25-year-old son. There was a push and a pull, and Anton was caught in this awkward embrace. Anton Gregorio was not an addict. He was not a drug dealer. He was, that Sunday afternoon in December of 2020, a young man who had fired off a homemade firecracker in the middle of his family's lawn. But the big man, who was a policeman, who lived down the road, did not like the Gregorio family, had for years been embroiled in a land dispute with the Gregorio family, had come rocketing righteous down the lawn, his 12-year-old daughter following him in tow. And he said he would arrest Anton. On the lawn, the entire Gregorio family is watching. The neighbors are standing. There is crying and there is screaming. And the 12-year-old daughter of the policeman shoves at Sonia and tells her to let go. Anton laughs. He said, "Your papa brought you up and you turned out like that?" "Just let go," said the little girl. Sonia said, "No. You let go. We're in our house. We're not leaving." The little girl, a curtain of hair framing her triangular face, leaned back and bellowed out the single sentence that would ricochet across Philippine cyberspace. "My father is a policeman." Sonia answers in a sing-song, "I don't care." It is an answer that is designed to infuriate a 12-year-old girl. It infuriates the cop instead. "Son of a bitch," he said. "You want me to end you now?" A gun barks. Every screaming voice goes silent. Bang, and Sonia falls. Bang, bang, Anton falls. Then a twitch from Sonia. Bang, and the screaming begins again. The little girl watches. She does not scream. I watched the video. My brain clicked through the images. It was like watching a movie based on the book that you have already read. The images were correct. The sequence was correct, but there seemed to be elements missing. It was only when I was trying to write down what I had seen that I understood what I had been looking for. I was listening for the thunder. It seemed to me that something as final as a fatal gunshot wound should come with more pomp and fanfare. There should have been an explosion, a mushroom cloud, something, somewhere, signaling the sudden turn from life to death. Instead, it was quick. 4 gunshots under the space of 5 seconds, just tap and bang, brief and innocuous. The sound of a hammer hitting a nail head has little practical difference to the sound of a bullet breaking into a man's head at close range. It was then that I discovered that I had spent a decade watching death in slow motion. I had built moments, movement by movement, the head turning, the arm rising, the finger jerking at the trigger. I packed in detail with every death. I traced the flight of a bullet from an autopsy report. I listed down witnesses. I included what someone had seen and felt and heard into walls of text, trying to reconstruct the last moments of a man's life. But the truth was simpler. It takes longer to type a sentence than it does to kill a man. There is a phrase in the Philippines that has been used whenever police officers sit down to brag about their prowess on the field. It is also the same phrase that you can find in a certain species of police report. In each report, the suspect is killed by the police in supposed shootouts or after the suspect allegedly presented a threat. The subject is discovered dead or almost dead, but that discovery occurs only after the smoke of gunfire subsides. In Binondo, for example, after the smoke of gunfire subsided, 2 suspects were seen sprawled lifeless inside the house. In Santa Cruz, when the smoke of gunfire subsided, police reported the subject lay in the cemented pavement mortally wounded. The same is true for a man in Tondo, found dead after the smoke of gunfire subsided. And in Jose Abad Santos, where another man was found on another cemented pavement, dead from gunshot wounds, after the smoke of gunfire subsided. It's a dramatic phrase, more than a little baroque, and it blurs the line between actual reality and grand hyperbole. But still, there is no cloud of smoke that comes out of a fired Colt 45 pistol, certainly not enough to obscure the body of a full-grown man. but the words are written and filed, registered in the official record. Slaughter dressed up in bureaucracies dulls the senses, and over time can anesthetize an entire population to the horror happening right where they live. Reality is winnowed away by each succeeding government report. The dead perish again into non-existence. And still, 3 months ago, on March 11, 2025, Rodrigo Duterte was arrested by the International Criminal Court. He is standing trial at The Hague for crimes against humanity. I would like to reiterate, Duterte said 2 years ago, "You sons of bitches in the ICC, I don't care." I cannot report with any accuracy how many people died during the drug war. The numbers are not reliable. And even using the highest estimates, over 30,000, cannot even approximate the human cost. Love's parents are dead, but Love lives, and she will remember them. The truth of the numbers may disappear into official lies, may be wrongly confirmed, badly noted, may be misprinted into historical records, but the truth is not unknowable, only unknown. Now, today, it is truth nonetheless. And truth cannot outlive the killers. It can be remembered and retold. And one day, maybe 1 generation, 2 generations on, the smoke of gunfire will subside, and a phalanx of men and women might stand up and be counted, might raise their hands, might say on the record, "They killed my family too." Now you might wonder why I tell the story this way, why I have gone past the numbers and the reportage to tell you what I saw and what I felt and what I heard. You found that strange? I find that very strange myself. Journalists are taught they're never the story. As it happens, the longer I was a journalist, the more suited I felt I was to the professional voice of an omniscient third person, belonging everywhere and nowhere, asking questions and answering none. The stories I wrote belong to other people, in other places, families whose grief and pain were so massive that mine was irrelevant. But I wrote a book about the dead and about the people left behind. It is true that I was afraid every day, and my inability to hold myself to account was not due only to a misguided sense of objectiveness. It was a failure of nerve. So this book is a citizen's account, a personal story from a Filipino who did not recognize her country as her own. The thousands who were killed with the permission of my people. I wrote the book because I refused to offer mine. I'll tell you one last story. Can you handle one more? Yeah? Okay. Because this is the only proper way to tell a story. There is no blood on the scene. The body had been abandoned at the high point of the bridge in the shadow of the cement parapet. He is a big man with big bare feet. He wears red basketball shorts and a sleeveless blue and white jersey. Truck headlights play over the thick plastic tape wrapped around his head like a helmet. Someone had scrawled on the brown cardboard sign left beside him, "Drug pusher, do not imitate." Camera lights flash. A radio reporter barks a dispatch. 10-wheeler delivery trucks rumble past the crowd of onlookers. The dead man lies perfectly symmetrical, flush against the wall, the still center of the roaring circus that is a Manila crime scene. I'm kneeling just outside the yellow tape when I hear her scream. It is a wordless, keening cry. I see her face first, pale in the distance, the blue and red police lights shooting off her hair. She comes running from the bottom of the bridge before flinging herself to the pavement beside me. Please, let me touch him, she begs the cops. Why won't you let me touch him? Her name is Ivy. She says the dead man is her husband. His name is Rene. She knows him by his feet. The investigator tries to cut through the packing tape mask. The scissors break. He takes out a cutter. The blade slices from the edge of an ear and traces the line of jaw and chin and cheek to curve under the other ear. The face underneath is slack and damp. A thin dark line runs over his neck. René Desierto had been stabbed 19 times. Cause of death was recorded as asphyxiation by ligature. He had been garroted. His death is an execution. Many things have happened in the year since he died. Ivy lost her job. She tried to cut open her wrist twice. Occasionally, she wrapped her head in packing tape in imitation of her dead husband. She said she wanted to know how it felt. There were days she believed his death was her fault. She has many reasons. If she had run up the bridge faster, she might have pumped his chest in time. If she had never filed a missing persons report, his killers might have let him live. The last of the reasons comes from their young son. Once, during an argument, Ivy had told René she wished he were dead. Their boy remembered. It's your fault, her son told her. You wanted Daddy to die. I'm writing a book, I tell Ivy. Tell them our story, she says. I see Ivy every few months. I carry a box of chicken for her son, sometimes donuts. She sets an ashtray on the plastic placemat. I push my pack of cigarettes across, along with my recorder. We light up before I press the button. We're on the record, I say. Gracias.
Well, Patricia, thank you very much. I have to say that I enjoy the book. I mean, all that you can enjoy a book like this, that it's so hard to read. It was a bit shocking to know you. I mean, you can see that the book is so cutting edge, and you have all these strong words, and then you see this small woman, so with such an energy talking, and I think a little bit, in a way, it matches with the book, but in another way, I was also surprised because we have to talk about the grammar of violence and the importance of words. And this is something that you can really see in your book, how important words are, how careful you are choosing the words that you're going to write. I mean, you write in your book how you go to the dictionaries, how you try to find the right meaning for every word, how words help you to write the book, but help the testimonies and help to write about the trauma.
How language helps?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? I think the care with choosing the language is more important during an authoritarian government than any sort of government, because language gets corrupted. And with authoritarian leaders, they talk big words. It's large, powerful rhetoric to let loose the dogs of war. And it is important for those of us who are still on the ground to return the meaning back to the words. What does murder mean? What does destroy mean? And what does it mean when someone is no longer human? Rodrigo Duterte killed people, or encouraged the killing of people, because he also said that, are they human? How do you define a human being? So for me, if nothing else, to summarize the book, it is an attempt to define what a human being is, which is everyone.
And which is so important because also reading the book, I mean, it's not only about the killings and it's about violation of human rights, but it's a lot about hate speech.
Certainly.
In fact, is how you build a hate speech that can dehumanize persons, people and their story, and can you dehumanize societies, and how people are dragged to build a story, the story that the president tells. And this is not a problem only in the Philippines. We're seeing how strong hate speech is being nowadays accepted, normalized, as Judith mentioned at the beginning, this idea of normalization of hate speech. And even when I was preparing also this dialogue, I saw a whole list of words that Donald Trump has decided to be forbidden words. You can't talk anymore about gender or transgender. So how important words are when you are building the narrative for hate speech and for certain politics, especially in autocracies.
As the power of an autocrat is the ability to tell a story. And when, for example, you talk about the other, whether it is a drug dealer, a criminal, an immigrant, people of particular religions or genders, it's very easy to interchange the enemy. All you have to do is have the big language and have the demonizing language. So yes, absolutely, I agree. Words are important in an autocrat being able to extend his beliefs to the people. In the case of the Philippines, the words kept getting more depraved every day. A drug addict is not human. A drug addict is a zombie. A drug addict is a slave. He is a paranoid schizophrenic who will butcher his father, rape his sister, will fuck a goat if a goat were all he could find to fuck. So yeah, language matters.
And how much they matter for you, because to what extent, I mean, you write about trauma, mm-hmm. and you write about people going through traumatizing experience, but how did it help you writing this book? If I consider that maybe you went through your own trauma, probably living those experiences, or had to explain those experiences, because that's something I also had in mind when I was reading, and then you mentioned that in the book. So you are explaining all those stories without a ticket back to go home. That's the big difference. You stay there, that's your own people, and that's your own country, and that makes a difference when you are telling those kind of stories.
Absolutely, because I cannot separate myself from that life. As to your first question, did the language, the storytelling, help me as a human being? Like, was it closure? Something like that? No. The book was a terrible, brutal process that I wanted to stop every day. And I would be a better person if I say that writing can save your life. It is a grand, wonderful thing. No. It was terrible. I don't think I can ever do it again. I smoked 4 packs a day, drank a lot of whiskey, drank a lot of caffeine, and I would advise that the way to deal with personal trauma, even if it's secondhand trauma, I did not suffer through the war. I chose to be a journalist. There are people who live with that terror every day. But for those of us who choose to cover the story, the answer to how to handle it, if you choose to be a journalist, is to have a tribe of people who believe what you do, who stand by you, who will cover the same dead body, go to the same witness, and who will not ask you why you're doing it because they're doing it themselves. It helps.
I interviewed Maria Ressa in 2023, and she was mentioning, I mean, she said, in my country, the Philippines, our fight has basically consisted of continuing to do our work. Mm-hmm. And that was the big challenge, in fact. I mean, all this process to make Rodrigo Duterte accountable, mm-hmm. for what it happened in a very hostile environment for journalism. It happened for you fighting against all the efforts to information suppression, disinformation, all the attacks, violent attacks also, the threats against you and your media. So how do you go through all this experience? How do you decide to stay, and how do you decide to write this book?
You mean, in spite of the hostile environment, why myself and many other people, I'm not the only one who did this, why many other people did it? On one hand, because because I'm a field reporter. I talk to the people, I go to the funerals, I go to the crime scenes, and then I go home and have a cappuccino. It is a terrible thing to know that there are two different things happening in your country. So, for me, the reason I kept doing it, as other journalists kept doing it, because if we didn't report it, it's as if it didn't happen. And the people who had the courage to tell their stories shouldn't be waiting for their stories to be told. We don't do it, I don't do it because I'm a good person. It's because I know. And it has to be put down on the record. It's because these people went through hell to tell their stories, and I have absolutely no right to keep silent. Or maybe it's because I used to be Catholic. I don't know.
Or maybe because you are the granddaughter of your grandfather.
I'm not quite sure about that, but possibly.
Because, I mean, you mentioned also in the book how he was also a journalist, how he was also going through some kind of political pressure, how he quit journalism, in fact. So that's something that you also learn with the book, this idea of these different periods in recent history of repression, and how, in fact, the freedom of expression has been haunted all over for different periods in the history of the Philippines.
Yes.
Yeah. So what do you think that your grandfather, for instance, would write now or would explain, because you talk about the irony of his stories?
My grandfather was extroverted, friendly, liked people. I am introverted, largely unfriendly, and very often do not like people. I do not know why I am a journalist. I frankly prefer to be on the other side of this stage, so this is terribly uncomfortable for me. But my grandfather was a journalist, and I have another uncle who is a journalist, and what he told my uncle was, the important thing is for you to keep friends, keep relationships. And when the revolution was happening in the 70s, in the 80s, my grandfather didn't go, because he said that he wanted to be part of the surviving majority, the people who stayed home and avoided the bullet that might be going to them. I don't think my grandfather would approve of my choice of profession.
And of you writing this book?
Possibly. Or he might find it funny. I really have no idea. I wish he were around for it. If nothing else, I might not have inherited his personality, but we smoke the same Marlboros.
This is a book to hold Duterte accountable. Now, at the end, there is some sort of, at least, justice seeking for all that. But what's Duterte's legacy in the Philippines? Because there were elections, the 12th of May, national and local, and you see the Dutertes and the Marcos again fighting in a way, in a bitter fight for power. So the legacy is there in a way.
I don't think I expected that the world would change if I wrote a book, and certainly even if Duterte is standing trial in The Hague, it doesn't mean that there's accountability or justice. It's a start for some of the families, but it's just a small step forward. And I spoke to many of the families in the aftermath of former President Duterte's arrest, and they will tell you they were happy, but they were not happy, because They lost sons and daughters. They spent 6 years trying to prove that their children and their husbands and their cousins were human. They would trade any justice for having them back and alive, living in their homes, talking to their kids, singing songs. So I don't know if justice is going to happen. I never expect grand things. But when it comes to legacy, yes, Duterte is now the mayor again of Davao City. Even if he's standing trial, he is not convicted in a local tribunal, he is allowed to win elections in the Philippines. So he's mayor of Davao City. I think his legacy will run through generations in the Philippines. It will be the traumatized children who lost their parents in the drug war. It will be the traumatized children whose parents were killers during the drug war. And it will be the many young people who watched what was happening, saw the bodies by the side of the road, saw the newspaper reports, saw the television shows at night with body following body following body, who will think, this is all right. This is how to run a country. This is acceptable. It will be a long time. That's the legacy.
The other legacy probably is on this hate speech that he left with his own narrative of who are the criminals, the way he gave a name to the others, the othering of certain parts of the society. And this has also stayed, in fact, this harassment of the press, the difficulty to have your job, to do your job in the Philippines. And for that, he had some kind of instruments or even help of, for instance, social networks, the digital platforms. There were campaigns also of disinformation, for instance, against your media, but not only. So there is a whole environment that it's really helping to this press harassment that goes beyond the president and the hate speech that he builds. There are certain contributors to make this more successful.
Certainly. But I also would not reduce it only to social media. Without social media, there would be television. Before that, there would be newspapers. There would be a stage out on the street with some charismatic politicians saying, let's kill everyone. This is not new. And people have never had trouble hating other people. It's also not exotic to the Philippines. We are not some rare breed that woke up one morning and said, let's kill everyone. It happens everywhere in the world. And yes, social media certainly makes it easier. But the sentiments of people in their houses, in the field, the solid realities that they live with, those are important too. Filipinos were vulnerable to Duterte, because institutions were failing, people were impoverished, education is not great. Another Duterte could walk in and the same thing could happen. It could happen anywhere. It happened to us. We're a cautionary tale, except that Duterte was really on the far edge of articulating how terrible it is when an autocrat stands up and then decides that some people need killing.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's open the floor to other questions of our audience. Do you want to join the conversation? We have a microphone. Podeu aixecar la mà, els qui vulgueu preguntar. Now you can use, yes, the translation. Si hi ha pregunta, anava a dir, si no, continuo jo.
Hello, thanks for your conference. It was really interesting. Well, ho faig en català o ho faig en anglès?
Amb el que tu vulguis. Ara té traducció, vull dir que tu...
Okay, I wanted to ask you two questions, one more specific, I guess, and another one a little bit more open. The first one is regarding the role of the untraceable guns built in the Philippines during the killings. And the other one is regarding Indonesia, relatively close to the Philippines, that had a genocide during the 60s, 70s, and this had, well, nothing had changed since the genocide in the Philippines. The same people are in power, even though the dictator is not the same. The family has the power. Do you see the same in the Philippines with the Marcos and the Duterte family?
Well, our president is the son of the dictator of the 70s. Our vice president is the daughter of the autocrat of 5 years ago. So, yes.
The role of the untracing guns.
What is the question?
Which role did they play? And which role did they play? And if this affects the investigation of the ICC?
I'm not quite sure what you're referring to when you speak of the untraceable guns.
Well, there's an industry of untraceable guns. If they were used massively during the killings, and if it's the case, if this affects the investigation of the ICC.
There were a large number of homemade guns used during the drug war. Quite a lot of weapons were used during the drug war, and the police certainly used their own. But in terms of the investigation, I think it's less worrisome to have untraceable guns, as you say. It's more worrisome not to have investigations. If you go into a crime scene, what happens in the aftermath? There's very little investigation. We still run paraffin tests, which are not acceptable in most places anymore. So with a weak investigative units in the police, certainly it makes it harder for the ICC.
Okay, but you have been really talking still about justice being made. You've been touring in the country with some of the witness of the stories that you explain in your book. Do you feel, or do you think that they feel that there is justice being made?
As I said earlier, that they are joyful in a fashion that former President Duterte was arrested, but I don't think it can be reduced to closure or justice being made. It's a beginning. And joy, you can have more than one feeling at once. They're joyful, they're sad, they're angry, they're raging. There are many things all at once. Especially the many mothers who for years have been sitting in panels just like this, or any reporter who will possibly tell their story and saying the same story again and again and again. They shouldn't have to. It should be the police who are prosecuting on their behalf because someone had died. But it's on them. And books like this are impossible without the bravery of people like that. So do they feel that justice has been achieved? Certainly not.
But they have a voice, and that's something. You were talking about the responsibility of the media, not only about social platforms, but you said there will be television, and in fact, you also mentioned in the book that there are also journalists who are ready to magnify or soften certain narratives of Duterte in that case. So there is a responsibility for traditional media, and that has also changed in a way. So in this period where there is this prosecution in a way of journalists, that there is this harassment, that you have all these methods like slaps to bury investigative journalists under judiciary, for instance, with the threat of big lawyers trying to silence journalists. All these things are happening. So there is this prosecution, in fact, social, political prosecution of freedom of speech. So we have now these new autocrats. We have Trump again in the US when he was the first time he got into the White House, he said, we are here to have media accountable. So it has changed the narrative. So it's not media who has to keep the power accountable. We have now power who decides to make the press accountable, to put the burden and the control and the pressure on the media. So this is changing completely.
Well, most governments don't like the media. So it's never just one way, like the media holding the government accountable. The government, certainly across years and in many countries, have never been pleased with people who try to hold them accountable. But what's happening in the United States and many places all over the world, there is a chilling effect. If the journalist is unable to report, then we do not have the ability to make decisions. So certainly it's a terrible thing when journalists are put under pressure.
And this is a trend that now that you go touring with the book, for instance, that you have been also forcibly, in a way, living abroad, you feel that what has been happening in the Philippines, or what some people has gone through, especially from a journalistic point of view, this is more a shared experience.
Absolutely. I think being a member of the free press is like being a member of a brotherhood, certainly not a priesthood, and certainly not something that gives you enormous amounts of money, but it's hard to explain why you're a journalist, but everyone goes through the same shit. And you hope that, I was not supposed to say that? Okay.
Yes.
Nah.
Yes.
Sorry. Everyone goes through the same thing. And whether you come from, you're a reporter in Gaza or you're a reporter in Manila, and there are obviously different levels of what you suffer, the compulsion quite often is the same, to keep a record.
And how do you deal with another dilemma that you mentioned in the book? How do you do that without the temptation or even the risk of getting distant or even cynical?
I'll tell you a secret. I'm very cynical.
Well, that's what you say, but I don't believe that.
How do you not be cynical? I think if you define cynicism as just having no faith in, good things, and you never look at the positive side, I'm terribly cynical. But I do have faith in people, certain people. It is unbelievable the amount of risk and courage so many people have chosen to resist. Not just people I spoke to for this book, people everywhere. The priests who took in suspected dealers and addicts and put them in sanctuary, for example, at risk to their lives. The many activists who kept doing this, the other journalists who took far more risks than I did. And I listen to their stories all the time. I hear what they say. I know what they go through. I understand the choices they make that I wouldn't dare make myself. So if you were exposed to all of those things, then you believe. You have a little faith.
That's a good point.
If you ask no questions, the CCCB will have to let me go out and smoke.
No, we do have a question. Sorry. You will have to wait a little bit more.
Thank you very much for your very rich lecture. And I have maybe a couple of questions. One is following up the previous question about the president Philippines and the vice president. Maybe for those people who are less familiar with the Philippines, can you tell us a bit more how is that the people in the Philippines keep voting the same families? And maybe just to add something else, here in Barcelona, as you may know, the community from the Philippines is very large. So I would like to know the difference between those in the diaspora and those who stay in the country. How do you feel that I don't know if there are differences between how they feel about all this situation. And the second very quick question has to do with grief and mourning. Do you think that there are any individual and collective strategies of healing while there are these people in power? I don't know how this process can be done, because it's very difficult to find ways of both individually and both collectively heal all what you explain. Thank you very much.
For the first question, why we vote for the same people? All the time, I wish I knew the answer to that. All I know is my job as a reporter is to keep writing down what's happening in the field so people can make an informed decision. But also, in the Philippines, to quote Joan Didion, the future is always bright because no one remembers the past. As to the diaspora, I do not know. To clarify, I live in Manila. I'm here for a residency, but I live, report, and work in Manila. So the experience of the diaspora is not something I can share or quite understand. I'm the sort of reporter who will not answer questions if I didn't interview people beforehand. So I have no idea. What I do know is that the Duterte vote was powerful across the world in the diaspora. Mr. Duterte appealed very much to the diaspora because he argued that if you are an overseas Filipino worker and you're sending your money to the Philippines, and then your drug dealer, your drug addict person takes over your daughter or your son, what happens? You're not there. I will take care of them. I will save them. So to the second question, the mourning, you're right, it's very hard. But it happened across the drug war. People grieved and people mourned, and it was collective. And the mothers banded together. People who weren't very close before, they banded together in resistance. They took care of each other's children. I have been in churches where mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers and whatnot, survivors, have come together to tell their stories to each other and to other people. Also, if you end up in the Philippines, there's a nice coffee shop called Silingan. There are 3 branches in the Philippines, and they are all run by widows of the drug war. And then, if you ask them, they'll tell you their story. All good?
Yes.
Dang.
Hi, my name is Mary, and I'm an immigrant. Well, I'm a child of immigrant parents, and I'm Filipina. So,
Hola.
I'm such a really inspired. I'm so inspired by you, and hearing you asking all these questions just brought up all these like enraging feelings. Because one, why do Filipinos keep voting these politicians? Just what she said before. It's a cycle. If we don't like improve the education, if we don't improve healthcare, poverty, everything, and people, uneducated people, are easier to manipulate. And if you someone actually told me that during the election, correct me if I'm wrong, Facebook was like free for mobile phones in the Philippines. So like the fake propaganda and all these hate speech that Duterte was like telling to win the election was free. And everyone who had phone, and especially like poor people, had access to phones, and yeah, they was just easier to manipulate. And if you sum up 1 million, or I don't know how many, population is in the Philippines. If you sum all these up, then tyrannical president wins. And so the other part about what you said about the healing part, how do we heal? We build a better country. We build it with people, you just have to improve the whole system so you can elect a better leader. That's it. And how does it affect other OFW or Filipino people who had to migrate? Me. I mean, our family had to migrate because of poverty. And I am really grateful that I got to study here. Sorry. That's why I really believe that I won't vote for a president like that. But I see that my grandparents are still actively supporting this kind of people, and it's really enraging because you see the difference. It's the education. That's it.
Thank
Sorry.
you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think we had another question. Please, please.
Thank you for sharing. Puta, ganun. But I would like to add though that while a lot of Duterte supporters were impoverished, it cut across all classes. The very rich people, the middle class, across the board, people voted for Rodrigo Duterte. Well, we need better education. Apparently, education is also not necessarily protection. So it was across the board. The accountability covers everyone in the Philippines. Maybe us journalists, we didn't tell the story right. And I wouldn't also discount, while there is a lot of misinformation, there was a lot of manipulation, people's feelings for Duterte was sincere. They believed he would save them because life was terrible. Because Duterte is a new name to Manila, to the rest of the country. He was king of Davao. But to the rest of the Philippines, here is a man who will change things. He is not part of the old oligarchy. He is not part of the cycle of Marcos to Aquino to Macapagal Arroyo. So he was new. I think why Duterte won and other people won is far more nuanced and depends on individual experience and individual opinion. There are people who used drugs who voted for Duterte because they thought it could make them change. It's just they died. There are people who voted Duterte because they thought he swore really funny and he talks great and he probably didn't mean to kill people. And then there are people who voted for Duterte because they wanted Duterte to kill drug addicts, except the drug addicts who were their next door neighbors because they were friends. So it is very easy to reduce it to just, we voted for a bad guy. But the truth is the Philippines might have voted for death. But what they were really voting for? They were voting for hope. They thought things would change.
Okay. Yes. Anya?
Thank you very much for the talk again. And these are questions that you've probably been asked many times, but I would like to ask, given how much you haven't covered, to what extent do you have to take precautions and take care of yourself? Maybe not nowadays, but during the years where you were doing all these interviews and research where you threatened and so on.
I had to take a lot of precautions. We had to be very careful. And the trouble is, what your concern usually is that yes, the people you interview, the cops, the vigilantes, people you might piss off one way or the other might go after you. But the greater danger is to the people you speak to. Like the widow who saw a killing, the 15-year-old boy who said, okay, I know what the killer looks like. You worry constantly that your sources are in danger, and you're just a journalist. When someone gets shot because they talk to you, you can't do anything about it. So part of the precaution is to make sure that right before you go on the record, you demand informed consent. Not just, do you want an interview? You tell them what the risks are. You check that they're ready. If their compulsion to tell the story is higher than any possible risk, That's great. And then you go back 1 week later, 1 month later, 1 year later, and ask, are you still good for this? I remember that a day before I published a story on Rappler, I spoke to a mother who had witnessed for the story, and she used her real name, including her son's real name as well. She had many sons and one had died. And I asked, do you still want to publish? Are you sure? And then she cried. She said she was grateful that finally her son's story would come to light, that there was hope and all of that. And I said, I'm not sure about the hope, but thank you. So we're good. Then I leave. We published the story the next day. An hour later, I get a phone call because I gave her a burner phone. I got a phone call and said, her other son will die and it's because of what I wrote. And we found out from another source that the police had put mobile units around the area. My negotiation with my bosses is that I would publish the story, but I would stay out of the area in the aftermath because my face was known. And because I was not very sane at that time, I kept trying to go back. The woman insisted she needed to be moved out of her house, but she would not accept help from anyone other than me. But I couldn't go in either. So it was hours of waiting for the next message, the next call, until I guess we convinced her to go to accept assistance from an institution that we wanted her we trusted that could help her. But I kid you not, until now, every time I get a phone call from an unknown number, I think it's going to be her. Or someone else who will say, my son is dead because of what you did. That is what eats your mind. It's not the gunshot.
We had already one last question with a microphone.
Hi,
ready.
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Patricia. I will do just a quick question so you can go to smoke.
Gracias.
It's just because you have talked about the narratives, no, of the authoritarian as Duterte, but right now we have the son of a dictator, no, like the president of the Philippines. And I wanted to ask you, what do you think about this change of the narrative, no? Because now the government of Marcoses has using a narrative like more supposedly aligned with human rights, no? And if this change of narrative, that it hasn't changed any killing because supposedly, apparently, in comparison of the Duterte administration, has been killed the same people with this change of narrative, no? So I don't know if you think it's even worse, not the narrative that is using the Marcoses, supposedly more aligned with the human rights, but killing the same people as Duterte. So it's like a kind of perverse, no?
I think by applauding the beginning of accountability of Rodrigo Duterte does not excuse whatever failures a current government has. I think it is incumbent on the Marcos government, because it is the government, to hold to account people who have committed human rights violations in the previous administration. In the same way, I think the Marcoses need to account for the killings of the 80s and the 70s. And yes, we do not have an autocrat standing behind the rostrum now saying, kill them all. But they die anyway. Under President Marcos's administration, there is an independent count being run by the University of the Philippines. 900 are dead in drug-related incidents. So while I cannot independently confirm that, I can say people are still dying. And it is necessary to hold President Marcos accountable for that, regardless of the narrative, the same way President Duterte should be held accountable.
So with a lot of work that's still to be done.
Quite a lot.
I think we can leave it here, but it's been really a pleasure, an honor, and thank you for sharing all your experience. Thank you for the book.
Encantada.
Also. Muchas gracias.
Oh, wait. I have something to say. I practiced. May I?
Yes.
Estic contento de estar a Barcelona. Gracias.
I ara, si ja ho sabeu, si voleu el llibre i que us el firmi, doncs el podeu comprar a la sortida. Moltes gràcies a tots i bona tarda.